good evening, Mr. X's class. So I know many of my students are going to be watching the video today too because you're on the field trip. I hope you enjoyed it. So we're talking about the word for today, which is intrinsic. So it's an adjective. I've heard it pronounced, so that has an S there. People sometimes say it like an S, intrinsic, or they also say it like a Z, intrinsic. I think both are okay. You could pronounce it either way, S or Z, intrinsic or intrinsic. It's belonging to or part of the real nature of somebody or something. It's a synonym for inherent, which could help you because inherent is a word that you should already know from quarter 2. If you were in this school quarter 2, last quarter we had the word inherent. This really has the same meaning as inherent. Inherent with an N. So that means like basic, natural, essential. So here's an example. So I explained here. Intrinsic is a synonym for inherent. It means that something is a basic, natural, essential characteristic. Not added, not learned. Like you're born, like for a person, you're born with it. You didn't learn it, you're born with it. It's like a basic thing in your personality that never changes, and you didn't have to learn it, you already had it. So it could be, so I gave an example with a talent. It can be for a talent, but a student asked me, is it always good? Is it always a talent? No, it could be anything. It just means that it's a basic part of your personality. So my example was with Mozart, the composer. Mozart had an intrinsic talent for music. How do we know that? Because he started writing music at age 3. So most people who want to learn music have to go to school and study music. He was so talented, he had a natural intrinsic or inherent talent that he could just write music, almost like nobody taught him. He did not need to go to school to learn it. It came naturally. So he had a natural, intrinsic means natural, a natural talent. But it could be something bad. The student was asking, do you think that selfishness is intrinsic or not? And that's something you could argue about, right? But if you say that it is, you could say this person had an intrinsic selfishness. If you say that, that means that person did not learn to be selfish. That person was born selfish. You could argue if that's possible or not, but that's what the word means. It means like it's born. You're born that way. You could talk about like somebody's appearance too. Their intrinsic appearance. Like you have an intrinsic, I don't know, you could talk about somebody's intrinsic hair color maybe. You can dye your hair, but underneath it, your natural hair color is still the same color. At least until you get old and it turns gray, but, right? But, yeah, you could say that. You could talk about an intrinsic characteristic of, and not just people. People, if you want to make a sentence, people are easy to make sentences about, but it could be a thing too, or like, so you could talk about escuela popular. What's an intrinsic quality, intrinsic characteristic of escuela popular? We could say is maybe, I hope, is that students and teachers care about each other as a community. That's what Maestra Lydia wanted when she created the school. So that's what she's hoping for anyway, that it would be an intrinsic characteristic. That it's a basic fact about the school that doesn't change. You don't have to add it, it's already there. Basic fact about something. So in Spanish, intrínseco, word family intrinsically, what's the part of speech of that? Adverb. How do we know? Ly. There's an ly. As I always say, there are exceptions. There are exceptions like the word friendly is an adjective, for example. But 90% of the time, words with ly are adverbs. And that's a double L. Okay, and synonyms, basic, inborn, or inherent. Inherent, which is your word from quarter 2. Antonyms, accidental, unimportant, or learned. So this would be like, if you learn it, it's not inherent, it's not intrinsic, because you had to learn it. You didn't already have it. Intrinsic is like, it's already there. You don't have to learn it. It's a basic fact. It's already there. You could talk about this with science too, like an intrinsic characteristic of, I don't know, let's see. What's an intrinsic characteristic of water is that it freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. That's an intrinsic. That's a fact about water. It's already there. You didn't add it. We don't have to go teach water. Hey, water, let's teach you to freeze. It happens already. So it's an intrinsic characteristic of water. Here's a sentence with literature. Great literature never loses its relevance, which I think is another word from, I can't remember which quarter. It's relevance means it's related to what's happening in the world. Never loses its relevance because of its intrinsic value in explaining the human condition. So what that's saying is that, at least according to English teachers, great literature has a value that never changes. We don't need to add it or take away from it. It is valuable just because that's true. It's like a fact. It's a basic fact. So like Shakespeare, because Shakespeare's stories are very, even though it's many years ago, the stories are very powerful, so people can connect to them from any time and any culture. It has a natural value that doesn't change. It's naturally part of its value. Okay, so that's about it for my explanation. Do you have any questions about intrinsic? And as I said, think about inherent. If you already know inherent, it's the same. So although that was last quarter. Questions? Okay, you can ask me more if you have more after we turn off the video. Thank you very much, and thanks for filming.